was planned for this date prior to the events of Gimel Tammuz. The date was chosen because the family of Mrs. Miriam Yehudis Lakin, Aleha HaShalom, whose first yahrzeit is today, asked us if we would agree to organize a program on Inyani Geulah Moshiach for this date. They must have had the great schus, their emunah in Inyani Moshiach, to also end up being a vessel for inspiration, if we can use this word, if we're allowed to use this word at these times. Bring us the words that will give us the courage and the hope to continue the holy mission that the Rebbe has installed upon us. This program is also sponsored Le'ilu Nishmas Mrs. Shendel Reitzes by her family. It is also sponsored Le'ilu Nishmas Reb Levi Eliyahu ben Yaakov David Halevi et Leah Bas Mordechai. It is also sponsored by the Spritzer family, Reb Yankel Spritzer and family. It is also sponsored by Reb Sholem Ber Brod, Reb Mordechai Gurari, the Deitch family, Yossi Spalter, and Moshe Rabashkin. May the schus of helping this program be a reality stand by them and all of Klal Yisrael for the ultimate fulfillment of our dream and our very desperate dream and cry to the Rabbeinu Shalom, Ad Mosai, how much longer do we have to stay in Golos? In honor of the program as it was scheduled originally, we have scheduled Rabbi Nissen Mangel to speak on the subject of Tchias HaMesim. Of course, it is far more relevant now. It has taken a new dimension in all our minds, as we are probably going to concentrate more on Tchias HaMesim for whatever reason, to bring some more understanding into the concept which was somewhat removed from us up till now. Rabbi Nissen Mangel will now speak on the subject of Tchias HaMesim.
I'm very dehydrated. Yes. Amen. Amen.
We are pleased to inform that first two tapes of this program are already available outside, as they will be available in the future, and the rest of the tapes. Now, please give your undivided attention to Reb Nissen Mangel. I must point out that Reb Nissen Mangel himself is a Holocaust survivor, and he has felt these questions that many of us have on his own flesh and blood some 50 years ago, and he stands strong in his emunah, and I'm sure he will inspire us with emunah in these trying times when many of us have questions.
Before I'll begin to discuss the topic of Tchias HaMesim, I'd like to make some remarks concerning our present situation. I'm sure the previous speakers also addressed themselves to the present situation, but I didn't have a chance to hear what they have to answer, what they have to say. Everybody is completely bewildered. Everybody is completely confused, perplexed. What's going on? Such a situation, the Chabad Chassidic movement, or the Chassidic movement in general, should be a movement without a head, without a Rebbe, has never been. For the last 300, 250, 300 years, every time when one leader, one Nossi, one Rebbe passed away, we immediately had another Nasi. So the first time in the history that we are a body without a head. So the Rebbe is called the Rosh Bnei Israel. How can a body exist without a head? And that's exactly what we are now. What's going on? Some people are even more bewildered and even more confused. What did the Rebbe tell us? Did we misconstrue? Did we misinterpret? Did we misunderstand what the Rebbe was telling us? The Rebbe gave us hints time and again about the present time. Mangel. And the Rebbe also gave us all kinds of hints who he is. Mamesh, Emiyat, Bisram Birishe Bebovel. We cannot say thousands upon thousands of Chassidim who interpreted the Rebbe's words, the Rebbe's hints. Who the Rebbe is was a mistake. Moreover, would the Rebbe even indirectly mislead us? Some people now say we completely misinterpreted the Rebbe's words. As you know, the old saying, you can fool some of the people all the time, you can fool all the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. For years and years and years, each and every Lubavitcher Chassid knew exactly who the Rebbe is. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misinterpretation. We knew exactly what the Rebbe meant. Can we imagine the Rebbe misled us, even indirectly? Some people say yes, individuals. But where were they before it happened? They themselves also believed in the hints that all the Muslim which the Rebbe was merames. So this is this complete confusion, bewilderment, perplexity. We simply don't know what's going on. But Moira Rabbi say, the Torah tells us, look in the Torah, you'll find some answers to your satisfaction. Again, I did not have a chance to hear what the previous speaker spoke. Maybe they gave logical, rational explanations. I just came back at the tail end of the previous speaker when I heard he spoke of the Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshiach ben David. I think I understand what he was alluding to, what he meant. But as you know, Chumash is a Pirush Rashi. Rashi is a commentary. Rashi gives an explanation. Some people prefer Ramban's explanation. Some people prefer all our emes, but nevertheless, some people like the explanation of a certain verse, a certain passage, a certain mitzvah, not what Rashi gives, what Ramban says. Some people prefer the Ibn Ezra, etc., etc. I do not negate simply because I don't know what the previous speakers did say, but I'd like just to present my own, in simple, succinct words, what's going on. As you know, last Shabbos before, in my shul, I give a shir, 7 o'clock, the news arrived, the Rebbe is our most critical situation. And the doctor said, the Rebbe was many times in a critical situation, but never in such a dire critical situation as when the news arrived at 7 o'clock in our shul. Of course, we immediately said Tehillim. Afterwards, approximately 9 o'clock, additional news came to us that the crisis even became more serious, and before Myra, we said again Tehillim. And then, around approximately 2 o'clock, as everybody remembers, the sirens went on. I immediately knew this is not you talk about Shofar Gadol. Moshiach will come, the big siren will go on, and everybody will feel Moshiach, will know Moshiach arrived. Intuitively, I felt this is not the siren Gadol of Moshiach. My little daughter came into the bedroom, and she asked what's going on. I told her the Rebbe went up to Gan Eden Elyon. She burst out crying. But ladies and gentlemen, what can we do with all the remozim, with all the hints and all the siches, which the Rebbe spoke quite clearly about our times, who he is, and what will soon happen. The Rebbe's critical situation began 7 o'clock. He could have passed away 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And it says in Kabbalah, if somebody passes away on Shabbos, especially the time of Raiva, the Raiva in Mincha time, which is the highest level, this is a most auspicious time for a person to pass away at Mincha time at Raiva, the Kol Raivin. Just for this reason, Yosef HaTzadik, Moshe Rabbeinu, and David HaMelech passed away at Mincha time Shabbos. And the Rebbe, that this big crisis also started at Raiva, the Kol Raivin in Mincha time, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, Shabbos. And the Rebbe schlepped it out. If some people prefer, it's easier for you to say the HaKadosh Baruch Hu schlepped it out. It should not happen on Shabbos. It should not happen even on Motzei Shabbos. When did this tragedy happen? 1:30. Everything is b'hashgacha pratis. As we know, a tzaddik is a balbos even when he should pass away and how he should pass away. But again, if some people are more comfortable, it's in the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it. Again, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu drag it out from 7 o'clock till 1:30? And this is the answer. The Rebbe passed away on Gimel Tammuz, as we know the significance in the Chassidic history of Gimel Tammuz. Notwithstanding the fact, Rabbi the Kol Raivin is such a moedic time for passing away, said David HaMelech, Malke Moshiach also passed away. Shabbos afternoon, in the evening, before Motzei Shabbos. And that could have happened also with the Rebbe, but it happened after Motzei Shabbos, after Chatzois, exactly 1:30, when it's after half an hour after Chatzois, after midnight. But we can find even a deeper explanation. Why did it have to happen so late? Not 7 o'clock, not 8 o'clock, not 9 o'clock. After 1:30, the Rebbe wanted to pass away not in Parshas Koirach, but the Rebbe wanted to pass away in Parshas Chukas. Why in Parshas Chukas? The Rebbe knew exactly what he promised us. The Rebbe knew exactly what he said in Divrei Kim Chaim, is in Chassidus, is Maimorim, what will be, and who is, and soon what will transpire. So everybody has these questions, what happened? So the Eibishter made it, and the Rebbe dragged it out till Parshas Chukas. The very term Chukas is Chukah, Chokakti, Gzera, Gezarti, Ve'elach, Reshus, Lahare, Lachreo. Just like Poradumo. Not one person, Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all the wise, the biggest Anoim, Amoraim, Nevim, nobody knew, I could understand the reasons for Poradumo, the red heifer. And the Eibishter says the only person to me was Nizgal, was revealed the reason for Poraduma was only only to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly what's going on, but not even the wisest of all wise Shlomo Melech did not understand the inyan of Poraduma. Ladies and gentlemen, whatever the Rebbe promised, the Rebbe never went bankrupt. Always the Rebbe kept every promise, the Rebbe fulfilled every promise, especially things which he did not only promise verbally to some people, but he wrote it down in his siches. The Rebbe wrote down in his Maimorim, Torah's emes, Moshe emes, the Torah's emes. Without any doubt, soon we'll see how all this also become fulfilled. But in the meantime, if anybody has any question, how come even just for a momentary period, a short while, the Rebbe left us, we're all confused. So the Rebbe says, it's Parshas Chukas. Just with Poraduma, we have no explanation until Moshiach comes, And then, of course, Parashas Chukas is also, Paraduma is also an explanation, but who knows it only? Only Moshe Rabbeinu. Not Shlomo Melech, no other prophet knows the explanation for this. We should just suspend our inquiry, our questions, and with this we should live just like Paraduma, and you'll see soon how the Rebbe's promises and what he wrote in the Sichas, in his Maimorim, and his Verbrengen, and Shchinem mit Aberes mit Ochgroinoi, you'll see all these things will become realized. And the Rebbe promised we are the last generation of Geulah and the first generation of Geulah. And we also know who is going to take us out from Geulah. Although to us right now it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, it's mind-boggling completely. But Paradum is also mind-boggling. And the Torah says just wait until Moshiach comes. And then you'll find the explanation. Let's just wait a few seconds, a few moments, just like Paraduma. And this is exactly why the Rebbe passed in Parshas Chukas. Ha-fachba, and you'll see whether we won't find as soon as Moshiach will come, whether Moshiach and the Rebbe won't give us the most logical, most acceptable, most comfortable explanations why this most bewildering, confusing situation had to happen. Right now, no Navi can understand, only Hakadosh Baruch Hu and the Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, but soon we'll see the explanations which will make sense, and then we'll see how whatever the Eibishter did was only for the good and it's right. A second point which I'd like to make, before we start discussing Gilgulim, Chesamesim, and this I find of utmost importance. As you know, the Rebbe many times in the Verbrengens and also in the Sichas and his letters, the Rebbe wrote about this community, Crown Heights, Kan Tziva Shemes HaBrocha. Here in this place, the Eibishter, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, commanded his blessing. The Rebbe says, this is the place for broches, v'atzloches, for all success, for all happiness, for all goodness. And the Rebbe said time and again, many times, he wanted all the chasanas and all the simchas should be performed, everything in this community, because the Rebbe says, Geulah, it's very auspicious. If you want the chasan, the shidduch should be very successful. You want the bar mitzvah should be very successful. You want your own Jewish home should be very happy and a successful home. The Rebbe says, this is the place, kan tziva Shemes HaBrocha. Ladies and gentlemen, in Torah everything is precise, everything is exact. What the term kan tziva Shemes HaBrocha? Because Baruch Hu commanded the brocha in this place. When it comes to a brocha, usually the expression is Hashem bestows a brocha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a brocha. What's the meaning? In the Torah, everything is exact and precise and meaningful. Can't see why here HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands his blessing. You say HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives his blessing, bestows his blessing. The Pshat, what the Mefarshim explain, as you know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Avarachaman, a Chazdon, kind and good and benevolent. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give each and every person broches and atzloches. But sometimes comes the Midas Adin and Mekatrik, the attribute of severity which the Eibishter has established. And before HaKadosh Baruch Hu can bestow the blessing, the Midas Adin is Mekatrik, accuses, does this person deserve all this abundance, all this blessing, all this goodness? Let's see, analyze, let's see, investigate his mitzvahs, his Torah, how he behaves to other people, that he deserves, he should be blessed. So that is a problem, because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu established Midas Adin. Midas Adin should contradict the Midas HaChesed. So sometimes the Eibishter says, never mind Midas Adin. I made you, I established you. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, be silent Midas Adin. Nevertheless, for this Yid, I want to send a brocha. Rabbi said, this is the meaning, this is the place. Although sometimes a person doesn't deserve to be blessed for all kinds of reasons. Because Midas Adin is Mekatrik. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kan Tziva Shemes HaBrocha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a commandment and he says to Midas Adin, be silent, don't protest, don't make any accusations anymore, because I want this Yid should have a brocha. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the place Kan Tziva, not HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a brocha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give a brocha elsewhere also. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give a brocha in Muncie, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give in different cities. But the Rabbi said, Kan Tziva Shemes HaBrocha. I'm aware of what's going on. Somebody can ask the question, what happened to Mrs. Lapine, other problems. But ladies and gentlemen, the Rebbe said, Kantsiva Hashem es habrocha. If a person wants to be blessed, a person wants to be happy, this is the place where a person should live. Why did I mention it? Till now, people can think, while the Rebbe was alive, what brought me to Crown Heights? To like the neighborhood. I like a place with beautiful gardens, backyards, more fresher air. What brought me to Crown Heights? The Rebbe. I want to be together with the Rebbe. How about now? This reason doesn't exist anymore. So I might as well move to Muncie. I might as well move to Flatbush. Might as well move to Queens or to a different place. The Rebbe said, Kantsiva Hashem es habrocha, the Yerushalayim of the world. So Mele, if anybody, not only for the sake of the Rebbe, for the sake of ourselves, once the Rebbe said, V'divrei tzadikim kayomim la'at, the Rebbe said, this is a place where you can be successful. This is a place where you can be happy. This is a place where everything can have nachas for your children. And never mind, you can have questions. How about Mrs. Lapine? The Rebbe will answer, why did it happen to Mrs. Lapine? But thousands of other people and families are Baruch Hashem happy. We don't know what might happen by moving to a different neighborhood. Until Moshiach comes, we should pledge ourselves and dedicate ourselves. Kantsiva Hashem es habrocha. This is the place which the Rebbe established. This is the Yerushalayim shel Mailo. This is the Yerushalayim shel Mato. And Kantsiva Hashem es habrocha. On the contrary, who am I to make a miftzah? But remember, the Rebbe said, one of the miftzahim was miftzah Shnas HaBinyan. All those people who did not buy houses here in Camp Tzivah Shemes HaBrocha, till now, let us buy houses from now on. We can improve, beautify the neighborhood. You can beautify your own house. Let's make it, let's show the world. Not Chas v'Shalom became discouraged and dispirited. Lubavitch will go on and be successful and thrive and will even enhance the neighborhood. I can tell you that a fund has been established for anybody who wants to buy a house. He'll get a nice help financially, and also we have to discuss about mortgages, but also for a down payment. Whoever wants to buy a house, and let's do it, and let's make stronger the neighborhood, more beautiful the neighborhood. Point. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go to Tchias HaMeisim, I'd just like to make one more point. In due time, we'll make some more points, but I just don't want to make too many points at the same time. Let's go slowly. As you know, the Rebbe said, what meant chinuch for the Rebbe? The Rebbe said he's a melamed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu called a melamed a teacher. And every Rebbe is a teacher. And chinuch was the apple of the Rebbe's eye. And many times the Rebbe spoke about the importance of education and chinuch and so on. And the Rebbe, once by Verbrengen, the Rebbe expressed himself. Your children are the Rebbe's children. Of course, the Rebbe meant himself, but he would never speak in the first person, so we'd say about the Friedrich Rebbe. But obviously, the Rebbe meant himself. The Rebbe says, how much you love your children, should know I love them equally, they are also my children. And the Rebbe said, speaking about the Rebbe, he says, and the Rebbe wants his children to learn in his mosdes, in his institutions, in his yeshivas, and his institutions. Again, some people can think, why keep the children in Lubavitch Yeshiva? Why keep the children in Olet Torah? Why keep the children in Beis Rivka? Some people have problems. The teacher is not so good. This is not so good. Let me tell you, there isn't one institution in the world which you cannot find a problem. The best university in the world, or at least the United States, is Harvard University. Does everybody want to go to Harvard? Some people have problems. They want to go to Yale. Does everybody want to go to Yale? They want to go to Columbia University. You can find problems in any place. And I agree with it, that needs some improvements. But nevertheless, the Rebbe said, your children are my children, and I want my children in my Moshiach. If there are problems, we have to establish about the chinuch. We try to improve the educational system. Some people have with the building problems. Some people have with the teacher problems. But the Rebbe promised, you want to have nachas for your children, put them in my Moshiach, because your children are my children. So these are the three things which I just wanted to, before we start with the topic of Ches HaMesim, to share with you. Number one, just like suspend all our questions, and we should not any shilas. It parishes b'chokaisa, where the Torah says, "Kukei chokakti." And let me tell you from my own personal experience, with this Chassidic view, I was brought up, as Rabbi Katzman mentioned before. I went through seven different death camps. Many times I did not see any possibility I should be able to survive much longer. But I never had any kasha today, Bishter. I always believed HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me. And Baruch Hashem, I did survive. I'm here now to speak to you. So consequently, we do have myriads of questions. As I said, all the Remozim and all the Sikhs, nobody made any mistake. And Chas v'Shalom to say the Rebbe said words in such a way that we should be able to misconstrue. The Rebbe indirectly misled us, Chas v'Shalom. Except let's wait with our, soon Moshiach will come. And let's wait with our questions. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshiach is going to answer that. The same thing also with the neighborhood. We should strengthen our neighborhood. And Chas v'Shalom, nobody should take out the children from the Rebbe's Moshiach, because the Rebbe said, your children are my children, and I want my children to learn in my Moshiach. Now we'll come to the main topic, which why I came here to speak, Ches HaMesim.
We are just making a little interruption as we are just about ready to go off the air. I don't want to interrupt in the middle of a subject. First of all, we want to thank WLIR for carrying this program live up until now. And to the audience out there, those who want to get tapes of this program, you can call 718-773-1546. You can get tapes of this program as well as of previous programs on the same subject. We also want to inform all Neshei Ubneis Chabad and Neshei Ubneis Yisrael. Tomorrow evening, Monday evening, there will be a youth-based Tammuz, Verbringen for ladies, a gathering for ladies, in the Lubavitchi Yeshiva on Crown Street and Albany Avenue in Crown Heights. All are invited to participate. One of the speakers will be one of the Maskirim of the Rebbe, Rabbi Leibel Groner. And now to all out there and to all here. We all know that when the Alter Rebbe was sitting in prison and he was visited by the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, they gave him a haftoche and they promised him that the derech of Chabad with the Nesius of Chabad will continue up until Moshiach. We also have the haftoche of the Rebbe Rashab, who said, we are from Malchus Beis David. And we have a haftoche as leyichbe neirei le'elam voed. Never will the candle of the leadership of Malchus Beis David expire. Never. Until the coming of Moshiach. So with certainty, the promise of the Baal Shem Tov, the Mezrishir Maggid, and the Rebbe Rashab, and all the haftoches that we had from the Rebbe, will be fulfilled and unfold in front of our eyes. In spite of all this pain, we chas v'sholem, for 1 second, do not doubt that any of the nevuos and the haftoches will be fulfilled. And finally, the process of the Geulah, as the Rebbe said, has already started. And like by Moshe Rabbeinu, when he said, Poket pakadati, he reminded us that the Geulah has already started. And Higias man Geulaschem. We don't ask the Eibishter why he has his plan in this way. We don't doubt that this is the way it had to be. However, we cry out and we scream to the Eibishter in the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, Lama harei oisa la'am hazeh. Ad masai do we have to sit in this bitter golus? Ad masai will we have to endure this pain, ad Mosai, how much longer? And now back to Rabbi Mangel on the subject of Tchias HaMesim.
Again, this topic of Tchias HaMesim was arranged much before the present tragic situation. So consequently, I want to address myself directly to the situation under hand with the Rebbe, but generally about the topic of Tchias HaMesim. As you know, Rambam formulated the 13 principles of the Torah, Yud Gimel Hikrim of the Torah. The 12th is believe in Moshiach, and the 13th and the final one, after Moshiach is going to come, will be a period of Tchias HaMesim when all that will be revived. To a certain extent, this union of Tchias HaMesim we can visualize as an ongoing process from the first day of creation. Not only it will happen after Moshiach will come, but the union from Tchias HaMesim began much, much earlier, to the extent we can say it began the very first day of creation. What do we mean by that? As you know, the Alter Rebbe says in Torah here, there isn't anybody or hardly anybody in this generation who's here the first time in this world. Even the Alter Rebbe, but the Maggid informed him that he's a neshama chadosha, he's a new neshama who was never here in the world before. The Alter Rebbe was absolutely stunned because he could not imagine that even in his time there is somebody who is here the first time. And the Alter Rebbe says, by and large, everybody, most people, I would venture to say, in this audience, maybe there's some tzaddik nister who's as great as the Alter Rebbe. Nobody is on a neshama chadosh is here the first time, but he previously, and since as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, a person didn't fulfill his mission. Why he came down to this world to fulfill the Torah mitzvahs, Hashem sends down to this, his neshama again to this world, and becomes enlivened again. And this happened with other Mauritian. Other mission came down a Geulah to Avram Avinu, and afterwards it still wasn't Mesak and everything came down a Geulah of Yitzchak, and Yankov, and even Moshe Rabbeinu was a Geulah of Hevel, and so on. So consequently, we are here not the first time. Now a person can die and come back again. It's an old Maaseh which precedes the Indian from Bias HaMashiach, said for the very first day, when Cain and Hevel died, they came then again. Hevel came down as Moshe Rabbeinu, Cain came down as Yisro, etc., etc. But anyways, this concept of Tchias HaMesim is an Indian which is an ongoing process. But yet there is a difference, a fundamental difference between Tchias HaMesim and the Indian of coming down again to rectify, to mashlim our shlichus in this world. Gilgulim is the neshama comes down, but in a different body, doesn't reside in the same body which a person passed away. Tchias HaMesim is the concept of Tchias HaMesim. A person's neshama comes down exactly the same neshama with the same body which he resided, which he was invested and enclosed in the previous existence. This is for Tchias HaMesim. The question, if a person was in Gilgulim several times, in which body will Tchias HaMesim take place, is a topic we discussed, not so much in Chassidus, but more discussed in Kabbalah, in the Zohar HaKodesh, in other works of Kabbalah, in which body will come out, whether in all the bodies or in one body. The consensus of most of the Mikubalim, that is also says in the Zohar, at least in one place, the neshama will come down, the main part of the neshama will come down to that body, which helped the neshama to fulfill most of the mitzvahs, and the rest of the bodies, which the neshama fulfilled a certain part. For example, in the first Gilgal, a person fulfilled 600 mitzvahs, but still didn't fulfill the remaining 30 mitzvahs, he has to come down again. So the next body only fulfilled the 30 mitzvahs. So a spark or a radius of the neshama will become also invested in that body, and consequently all bodies will eventually partake of the messianic kiluyim and bliss. The one who formulated this idea of Tchias HaMesim as a fundamental principle of Jewish religion was, everybody knows, who made the Yud Gimel Ikrim. It was the Rambam. Rambam was also, in addition to a great Gaon, a great tzaddik, was also a great philosopher. In Egypt, so a community of Jews who wrote a letter to the Rambam, and they said to the Rambam, we believe in God, we even believe in the immortality of the soul, but in Tchias HaMeisim, once the body is gone, the body should be resurrected and revived. They were philosophically oriented according to Aristotelian philosophy. There's no such a thing as Tchias HaMeisim resurrection. They said to the Rambam, please explain to us, we should be able to accept it because we believe in God, we believe in Talmud HaShemayim, but Tchias HaMeisim we cannot accept. What would you imagine, this great mind, this great scholar, this great philosopher Rambam could not explain logically the concept of Tchias HaMeisim? It's as simple, if Hashem could make first time the body, the first body, why can't HaKadosh Baruch create if HaKadosh Baruch made from nothing a body, how can HaKadosh Baruch create again the body? What's the big question? But they had problems in philosophy. Rambam couldn't explain it also philosophically. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what was the reaction of Rambam? Rambam said to one of his greatest Talmidim, Rabbi Yosef Henkin, and he said to him, since these people denied the belief in resurrection Tchias HaMeisim, they are Pikursim, they're heretics, they have no chelik in Olam Haba, I don't want to have anything to do with them. And you write to them, if they'll do tshuva, and he says, why do they deny the union of Tchias HaMeisim? You can think they have philosophical problems. Rambam says because they filed the metame, their nefesh through macholos asuras, they ate treifa food, and treifa food completely contaminated. It was metame the neshama, and for this reason they cannot accept the concept of Tchias HaMeisim. If they will do tshuva and stop eating treifa, let's see whether they'll still have a problem with Tchias HaMeisim philosophically or not. From this Rambam we see something tremendous. Sometimes a person can have a kasha or a problem about Yiddishkeit. Sometimes a person can have a kasha but a problem about Chassidus. Sometimes a person can have a kasha or a problem about the Rebbe. It makes no sense. The Rebbe promised something and it makes no sense. So the Rambam tells us sometimes the reason why you cannot accept certain teachings of the Torah. Sometimes you cannot accept certain in which says in Chassidus, because a person is not careful in macholos asuros, in forbidden fruit. A person is not with hashgoch and so on. He can contaminate, can pollute the neshama, and then a person has all kinds of kashas. So Rambam says, write to them. I don't want to even write to them. Let them do tshuva and eat kosher, and let's see whether they still have a problem. The Gemara says, even goyim believe in Tchias HaMeisim. And wonder of wonders, everybody heard of Queen Cleopatra. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, this queen called Cleopatra said to the mayor, I have no problem about the concept of Tchias HaMeisim. I know all people who died will rise again. But she says she has only one problem, one question. How will they arise? In the nude, naked, or with clothes? But in the very concept, she says, how will they arise? How will they make them, how will HaKadosh Baruch revive them again? But the Gemara says not even goyim have a problem with Tchias HaMeisim. To the extent the Gemara says, the Mendy says, one of the most vicious and anti-Semites of all time, Hadrian, the Emperor of Rome, tremendously persecuted Eden and killed hundreds of thousands of Jews. The Gemara says, the Mendy says, the Chazal tell us, Hadrian, the Emperor of Rome, asked Reb Shua ben Hananya, you believe in Tchias HaMeisim? I also like to believe in Tchias HaMeisim, but it makes no sense to me. Once the body disintegrated, and once the body returned to the earth, where will HaKadosh Baruch Hu make? That's the Tchias HaMeisim. Hashem is going to create a new body. Hashem is going to revive and resurrect the old body, but there's no more any body. So that's what he asked. How can I believe? And I'd like to believe it. It Tchias HaMeisim, but there's nothing remaining. How can the Eibishter make the old body alive again, but there's nothing remaining? Completely turned to earth and disintegrated. Reb Shua ben Hananya answered to Hadrian, there is one little bone in the spine of a person. This is discussed at length in the Zohar HaKodesh, in Medrashim, Ma'aber Yaibek, in many Sforim, in Kabbalah. There is one little bone, one little vertebra in the spine. And Reb Shua ben Levi said, this can lay in the ground for thousands of years. It will never get rotten. It can never disintegrate. And he says, as a proof, I challenge you. Throw it into fire. Fire won't be able to destroy it. take a hammer, an axe, try to smash it, you can't crush it. Take any liquid, it won't dissolve. And from this little bone will trace amazing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Chassidus explained this beautifully. How come there is one part in the body which remains forever and ever, no fire, and no liquids, no chemicals, and no axe or hammer can ever destroy it? Because a body corresponds to the neshama. There's just like in the neshama, there's the nefesh, and ruach, and neshama, and cha in yechidah. Chas v'sholem, a person, his neshama, nefesh can become soiled through averas. Even his ruach can become contaminated through averas. But there is one inner spark in the neshama, the Chiddush Nefesh. Even by the biggest Rasha, it remains always intact, holy, Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's called Yechidah. It's always united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the Chazal tell us, a Yid. If Chas v'Shalom should convert to any other religion, he still remains a Yid. Why? Because although his Nefesh became Tomeh, his Ruach became Tomeh, Chas v'Shalom. To a certain extent, even his Neshama, but the Chiddush Nefesh remains always pure, pristine, holy, Kodesh HaKadoshim. If this is in the Neshama, and since the body corresponds to the Neshama, there also has to be something which remains forever and ever. And this is Etzem Luz, and from this Etzem Luz will become the Inyan von Tchias HaMeisim. As a child, as I mentioned before, I was in Auschwitz, as Rabbi Katzman introduced me, mentioned before. I was in Auschwitz. As you know, 6 million Jews were burned in Auschwitz. When the ashes were taken out from the crematoriums, the bodies were turned into fine powder because this mighty fire was burning in the crematoriums. But every time as they brought out the ashes, as they shoveled out the ashes from the ovens, they always found a little bone in Auschwitz. And this I heard while I was in Auschwitz. At the time I was a little boy, 10, 11 years old. I did not understand its significance, its meaning. I came home. I went to yeshiva. I learned about Etzem Luz. Then I reminded myself, this is what Rabbi Shua ben Hanania said. From this bone will be resurrection, Tchias HaMeisim. If this bone never becomes destroyed, we saw 6 million bodies, the ashes, were burned into fine powder. But every time as they took out the ashes, there was always one little bone. It's the Chiddush Nefesh, a Yid, with always a Yid, and consequence for this will be also Tchias HaMeisim. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when will the Tchias HaMeisim take place? As I mentioned before, it's not a question about the future. It took place already. If you learn Tanakh, besides the concept of Geulah, which we discussed before, how about Eliyahu Novi? What, remember a story, Malachim Aleph, King's One? There was a story, he came to a certain woman, a widow, she had a little boy, and the Tanakh tells us the story. Suddenly the Ben Sarfas died. And what did Eliyahu do? Just look up in Malachim Aleph. Eliyahu was Mechayah Mason, the child. And you know who the child came to be? Who was this little boy whom Eliyahu was Mechayah Mason? Yoina Hanovi. Everybody knows the Yoina Hanovi, Yoina in the fish. There was this little boy who died. Eliyahu was Mechayah Mason. How about Elisha and the son of the Shunamis? It's the Malachim base. Another story, the little boy died, and Elisha revived the child. Mechayah Meisim. If you go to Ezekiel, Yechezkel, a whole chapter, remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Ezekiel, go out to the valley, and there are whole mountains of bones. And the Gemara discusses who were these bones. Those Ephraim who went out from Mitzrayim even before the time arrived, and they were killed by the Amaleks. A whole pile, a whole mountain of bones. And Yechezkel revived those bones. And the Gemara says, a certain sage, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he says, I am the great-grandson of one of those people whom Yechezkel revived. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows the story when Yitzchak was at Akedah. And Avraham, remember, what does Akedah mean? His hands were tied, his feet were tied behind him, and Avraham took out the big knife to Sheikh Yitzchak. You know what happened to Yitzchak? Chazal tell us when he saw the knife touched his throat, his neshama expired. And he died. And since the Abisha didn't want he should die, because the Amanifer has to come out from Yitzchak, Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, Yitzchak, his neshama was returned. And as you know, what's the second bracha in Shemoneh Esrei? What bracha do we make in Shemoneh Esrei, the second bracha? Baruch atah Hashem b'chayim eisim. You know who made this bracha? Yitzchak, when his neshama came back, he saw Tchias HaMeisim b'Poel Mamash, and he made the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem b'chayim eisim. We find in the Gemara numerous cases where Amoraim or Tanoim, where b'chayim eisim not only Yidden, but even Goyim. The Gemara tells us a story. Rabbi Yehuda the prince, was very, very friendly with Antoninus, the emperor of Rome. And once Antoninus came to Rebbe, of course, when Antoninus comes, he comes with a whole entourage of people. So Antoninus said to Rebbe's disciple, get me in one of my slaves. Bring him in. He went out, and he saw this slave that Antoninus wanted he should fetch him. This person died. So this disciple of Rabbi Yehuda didn't know what to do. Should I say he died? He'd be upset. Should I escape? It's not a covered for Antoninus. What did he do? This disciple of Rabbi Yehuda made Tchias HaMeisim, and the slave, this goy, became alive, and he took him in. And this goy said to Antoninus, I was already in Olam Haba. I came down as a result of this person's resurrection, I revived me. So then Antoninus exclaimed, the smallest sage among the Yidden can make Tchias HaMeisim. Much closer to our time, ladies and gentlemen. How about, who does not know the stories of Maral Prague? The great famous Maral Prague. As you know, in his time was this epidemic of blood libels. They used to kill Goyish children, and after fabricate a story, the Yidden killed him because they need the blood for Pesach. What did Maral Prague do many times, many stories? He could not refute their claims because they brought false witnesses that truly the Jews killed him. So what did Maral Prague do? As simple as Tchias HaMeisim, he revived the murdered child, brought him to the court, and he says, now you tell us who killed you. And who were the killers? Catholic priests. So Maral Prague made Tchias HaMeisim many times. So this is the Indian. When was the first period of Tchias HaMeisim was an ongoing process which was going on from the beginning of creation until our time, as witness the stories of Maral Prague. The second period of Tchias HaMeisim will be when Moshiach comes. And it's also a mock in the Gemara. As soon as Moshiach comes, we don't have to wait for the global, universal period of Tchias HaMeisim. Moshe v'Aaron and unique, special tzaddikim will be immediately with the coming of Moshiach. And of course, if Moshiach has to be from those who are non-living, Moshiach will be the very first one who will be Tchias HaMeisim. And with him, the Gemara says, will come Moshe v'Aaron will tell us exactly what to do in Beis HaMikdash. Who will know? As soon as Mashiach comes with the building of Beis HaMikdash, who will know what we have to do in Beis HaMikdash? So the Gemara says, much before the third period of Tchias HaMeisim, the global universal for everybody, will be the from Tchias HaMeisim. The second period, either Moshe v'Aaron or even Mashiach, if he's for the non-living. Of course, this goes without saying, what we are referring to now, to the second period of Tchias HaMeisim in our situation, our case. Then comes this third period of Tchias HaMeisim, but this is for everybody. For Amach, Kulam, Tzadikim, and everybody is a chelik Olam Haba, even the biggest Rashoyim, even those Rashoyim, the Chazal tell us, have no chelik in Olam Haba, won't have a chelik in Tchias HaMeisim. It's only if they didn't do tshuva. By the time of Tchias HaMeisim, by that time, every Yid will have done tshuva already. So consequently, each and every Yid, since it's a chelik mimal mamish, everybody's neshama, it's part of God. Of course, the neshama will be revived and come down to the body, in the body which resided before, and everybody will partake of the messianic bliss of all these tremendous giluyim. Now we can ask a further question. Why is it necessary Tchias HaMesim altogether? Why is it necessary, even Tchias HaMesim, why not just like Gilgulim? Why does the Neshama have to come down in the very same body which the Neshama resided before? What do we say about Gilgulim? The Neshama can come down in a different body. Why does have to be the body which the Neshama was before? In this, the Rishonim, the Ramban, and other Rishonim explain, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't withhold any reward from any being, from anything, whatever, a person or anything did something good, deserves and is entitled and will get a reward. How about the physical body? All the Neshama suffered for Torah mitzvahs. How about the body? The body also in the Geulah, it had to keep Shabbos and eat kosher and all these difficulties for the physical body. Shouldn't the Gashmitic body also get a reward? So Mele, the body will get a reward. And for this reason, exactly this body, not a different body, in which the Neshama, with which the Neshama did the mitzvahs and the body suffered, because Baruch is going to give this reward for this body for what it helped the Neshama while the Neshama was alive. Ladies and gentlemen, Chassidus gives a much, much deeper explanation. According to Chassidus, is the reason for Tchias HaMesim is something truly incredible. Nowadays, let me just at least mention very briefly, nowadays the Gashmistic body lives of the Neshama. If the eye wants to see, it is the Neshama. If the mouth wants to speak, it is the Neshama. If the body wants to exist, it is the Neshama. Nowadays the Neshama is being animated by the Neshama. When the Moshiach will come, this is tremendous in of Tchias HaMesim. The body will become, after Tchias HaMesim, so tremendously purified, so tremendously spiritualized, so tremendously sanctified, mamash, mind-boggling, it will be superior to the neshama. Can you imagine that? The physical body, this can also be one of the explanations why the Rebbe had to leave. Although the Rebbe's body is Kodesh HaKadoshim, but Kodesh HaKadoshim is also degrees and levels. After Tchias HaMesim, the body will be superior to the neshama. And then not that the body will live off the neshama. On the contrary, then the neshama will get its life force, its highest from the physical body. Can you imagine? And it's for this reason, a Rambam who did not know Chassidus, for him in his time it wasn't revealed, Rambam holds even after Tchias HaMesim will be death. Rambam maintains Moshiach will make Tchias HaMesim, Moshiach will have children, and afterwards Moshiach will die. Can you imagine? After Tchias HaMesim, this is what Rambam says. Even after Tchias HaMesim, if after Moshiach, there will still be death, because Rambam maintains the ultimate bliss, the ultimate happiness, the ultimate Geulah Elikus, who can take all the neshama, not the physical body. Because Rambam still was holding the opinion the body is inferior to the neshama. But Chassidus and Kabbalah teaches us, after Tchias HaMesim, the body will become so purified and so spiritualized and so refined and so holy, it will even transcend the kedusha of the neshama, and then not the neshama will receive the light, the body from the neshama. On the contrary. Let me just conclude. This is a topic which can speak a lot of Tchias HaMesim, Moshiach. As I see, it's already much after I was supposed to speak. Let me just conclude. The Moshiach, as the Rebbe promised us, and I said, not one word of the Rebbe, well, Chas v'Shalom, not to say Bitton deserve, or the Rebbe Chas v'Shalom misled us. Everything is emes la'mitay. And soon we'll see. In our time, not only the Bias HaMashiach, if the Rebbe would have been around, we'd only see Bias HaMashiach. And after the year from Tchias HaMesim, Naim Hashem, in our lifetime, and very, very soon, we'll say simultaneously both Bias HaMashiach and Tchias HaMesim, or let's say Tchias HaMesim and Bias HaMashiach, because now it will take simultaneously both. And let's hope in Hashem it will become B'kol B'meinu Mamish soon in our lifetime.
We are now going to go to questions and answers. Quite a few questions have already been passed on to the dais. I'd like to ask Rabbi Weisberg, Rabbi Blooming, also to help out in questions and answers. We've enlisted the help of Rabbi Gershon Aftzon from Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Nissen Mangel, perhaps you want to take some questions. Are there any specific questions for Rabbi Mangel? Because Rabbi Mangel has to leave. If there are any questions specifically for Rabbi Mangel, please pass them on. Could we ask Rabbi Blooming, Rabbi Aftzon, Rabbi Weisberg? You are wanted up front, Rabbi Weisberg. By the way, tapes of Rabbi Weisberg are already available in the back. And somebody please ask Rabbi Weisberg to come in. Rabbi Weisberg, most questions are targeted at you. Starting with a question which will be answered by Rabbi Gershon Aftzon. Question number 1. Why were we told that Moshiach will not die, and that even though it was originally going to be that way, it would not happen? Why weren't we told that there are sources that indicate otherwise? This is important because people outside and even inside Lubavitch could have a faltering trust in us for changing our story. We feel fooled that information was withheld from us. Before Rabbi Aftzon does answer, just one thing. To the question, why weren't we told that there are sources that indicate otherwise? I hate to say this, but we were. We were very full aware that there are sources that say certain things.
Before we answer this question really has another few questions which are connected with them. What about Dor HaShvi? What happens, as some people are quoted to have said, Dor HaShvi, where is the Dor HaShvi? The next question is, like we mentioned over here, why weren't we told? The answer for all these questions, in a nutshell, are very simple. The Rebbe, as we know, is Dor HaShvi, and as we know, what is the idea of Dor HaShvi? As the Rebbe says, the Dor HaShvi is the Dor, and the Rebbe is the head of the Dor, as he says, Hu Yigaleinu, he will be the one which will take us out of Golus. So the Rebbe is the one, just as Moshe Rabbeinu, who took us out of Egypt, took us out of Mitzrayim. Same too, the worst time in history was the time of the Holocaust, and the Rebbe took us out of this Holocaust which broke the Jewish people, both in spirit, both physically, mentally, totally broke the Jewish people. And the Rebbe single-handedly lifted up the Jewish people and brought them to the level which they are right now, bringing Judaism to each and every place in the world. The Rebbe, as we know, has promised many things, but the Nakuda of the Rebbe, what is the essence of the Rebbe? The essence of the Rebbe is bringing Emun in Klal Yisrael and bringing Emun in Bias Moshiach, which this, as the Rebbe took upon himself, both in the first Maimer and the last year, this was the idea of the Rebbe. Nords tchilasan b'seifan, v'seifan b'tchilasan. We know the etzem of the Rebbe is Emunah and Emunah to Moshiach. So it is not possible, as Rabbi Mangel told us, that the Rebbe will mislead us, and we know that there's a saying of the Rebbe, Chsidim haben a chush, so treffen the emes. Chsidim have this sensitivity and the truth, and they always say the right things. Therefore, when everyone said the Rebbe is Mashiach, it wasn't that they said the Rebbe is Mashiach and mistook and made a mistake. However, we know that what they said was totally true. Not only was it true, but if one would have thought at the time, and one would have mentioned, as the Rebbe many times mentioned, there are different things, and let us be yaitza, let us fulfill different things in a spiritual way, either in a way totally beruchnius, or as the Rebbe said in a different sicha and aura, in the sicha when he spoke about Rabbi Herz passing away of Moshe Yitzchak Herz, he said in a way of his alphus, one when a person, he doesn't die, but he loses his senses, he faints. So the Rebbe said that there is a possibility, but let us be yotzer, all these different Mamor Chazal, in a spiritual sense or in not such a physical sense. And therefore, when one spoke about Mashiach, and one must speak about Mashiach as an imminent thing, as something which will happen any 1 second, so one was not allowed to think that perhaps Mashiach will die. Even though he knew that there are Mamor Chazal about the death of Mashiach, however, one must think that Mashiach is coming this second. Achakalei b'chol yom sheyavai. Lishuascha kivinu kol hayoim, as the Rebbe said. Not only kol yom, but kol hayoim. Therefore, if one thinks that this second Mashiach is coming, and one knows that Mashiach is a living being, therefore, one must say that the Rebbe is Mashiach. And we will add to this a little. Our belief that the Rebbe's Mashiach is not based on the Rambam and is not based on other things. Therefore, if one comes and says, I will learn the Rambam in a different way, so he will come and be Sosa and he will say, well, I can slug up the Rambam, I can say it in a different way. Or as other people say, I have to do with many Rum people, I live in Yerushalayim, and many people say, let's do the Ramban, maybe the Ramban. Now they say, oh, you're like the Ramban, and we're the Rambam. We say, it's not the Rebbe, no, you're saying the Ramban. You're reverting on what you said before. The answer is no. The answer is, B'shas Ma'isa, our belief in Moshiach is, as the Rebbe said, Dor HaShvi is the Dor HaGeulah. And the Rebbe said, we are in the Dor HaGeulah, and the Rebbe said in himself that there is Slikan Shel Misasan Shel Tzadikim, the death of Tzadikim, which is Yoister Kasha, than the Churban Abayis. When was there a time that the Churban Abayis was felt, that the Misa of a Tzadik was felt even more than Churban Abayis, if not Gimel Tammuz? A day when we didn't see the V'zarach HaShemesh. Every other time in history we saw that there was a beacon of light which was going to continue and take us out of the Golos. However, right now we don't see it. However, even on this, the Rebbe has also led us, and we look in the Sichas, and the Rebbe says a very interesting point in two different Sichas. Two different answers of the Rebbe. One time the Rebbe writes, in regard to this Rambam, which people can ask a question, what is with the Rambam that you said for 3 years you base yourself on the Rambam, that the Rebbe is Mashiach because it's a living person? The Rebbe says, Melech shoyekvar Melech. The first important thing of Mashiach, that he is a Melech, this is a basis and this is a must for there to be Melech HaMashiach. However, once he is Melech HaMashiach, then it's Shayach. There is the possibility of Hepech HaChaim for these few seconds. And then the Rebbe adds in a horror, in a different Sikh, which was the Likud of Vayigash, Tovshin Nun Aleph Tinotzei. The Rebbe speaks about the David Avdi, Notzi Melech Aleim Li'olam, and the Rebbe says as follows, that the reason why David will not be the Mashiach is because the Pa'ula of Mashiach is what Mashiach does in the world. David has not begun this Pa'ula. He has begun the Pa'ula, which we know that there's two stages, as we speak about in the Sichos of Balak, that he speaks about all the ideas of Mashiach. David has begun. But there is in a more spiritual way. However, in a physical way, and this is what the Rebbe spoke about, the Psak Din of the Rabbanim. The Rebbe mentioned and he made a fact that the Rabbanim said that there's a Psak Din, that there is already a Mashiach, that there is already a Melech. These words of the Rebbe have strong impact nowadays. That although there happened what happened Gimel Tammuz, still this does not take away any of the validity, even according to the Rambam, that the Rambam says that there must be a living Mashiach because Kfar Molech. And more so, this doesn't take away anything because, as the Rebbe said and mentioned before, that the Pa'ula of Mashiach has already begun in the world, both in the idea of changing over ammunition to agricultural weapons, instead of weapons to different things which we need for agriculture, and the other things which the Rebbe mentioned. So therefore, the Pa'ula of Mashiach has already begun in the world. And I will conclude that the Rebbe says a very interesting thing. And we look into the history of the last 5 years, we notice another very interesting thing. That 5 years ago, the Rebbe fought against the left-wing government, and he didn't want that Shimon Peres or Yitzchak Rabin will be the leader of the Jewish state of Israel, the prime minister of Israel. 2 years later, the Rebbe said to Moshe Katsav to give over to Yitzchak Shamir, that if you will not go in a strong hand, Shamir, I will. And the Rebbe mentioned his name personally, which the Rebbe only did it 3 times in the duration of the 44 years of Nesius. I personally, and he said his name, will throw you down from being prime minister. Did the Rebbe not know that the left-wing government is even worse than the Yitzchak Shamir's government? The idea is, all the explanation of the Rebbe we will never know. But one thing we do see, because Tov Shin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe has already said, not only Yigiyaz Mangel Aschem, but the beginning has already begun. Once the procession has begun, there's no way to stop the procession. It will go on, and the Rebbe will finally lead us out of Golus. And as the Rebbe finishes in the first Maimer, V'hu Yoylichenu, he will lead us out of Golus after the Kitzuranu Sheikh Nyopa, V'hu Yoylichenu B'Korav Mamash.
This question was addressed to Rabbi Mangel, I believe, and I can't give you an absolute answer because I didn't research it. The question is, do the Goyim have an etzem luz? Now, the only thing that comes to mind is that it says that the etzem luz benefits and draws its life and survival from Sudas Mlav Malka. I am totally unfamiliar of a custom by the Goyim of eating Mlav Malka. So I don't know what connection they have with this whole concept, unless you can show me otherwise. Okay, I am told now that Rabbi Mangel suggested a different answer, that the physical etzem luz does exist, and he says that the Eibishter will make a decision whom and if he will revive any of them, and I guess it seems that Chsidei Umas Ha'olam will be revived, according to what Rabbi Mangel had to say. Okay, this question is addressed to Rabbi Weisberg. Number 1, it seems a game, chas v'sholem. Till last week, we were shouting that Rambam is the halacha, and now we changed our mind. The Rambam is not halacha anymore. It's addressed to Rabbi Weisberg. Number 2, I read in an article of yours that tzaddikim prayed that we should skip the stage of Moshiach ben Yosef, and for sure that their tefillos were answered. So how could it be that the Rebbe was Moshiach ben Yosef? These two questions are addressed to Rabbi Weisberg. He will answer these questions.
The first question about the Rambam, that we were always saying the Rambam was halacha, now we're saying the Rambam is not halacha. We never ever discussed this Rambam about when the Rambam concludes that if Moshiach is killed, we know that he's not Moshiach. We never ever discussed. We're always focusing on the first part of the Rambam. The Rambam says that Yamid Melech and Beis David, and he goes through the process of Cheskes Mashiach. This is what we always focus on. The Rebbe mentioned it dozens of times, and we never really discussed the second part of the Rambam B'chalal. We never said it's lahalacha or not. I mean, people are a little surprised to know that we don't pass like the Rambam. Everybody knows who learns halacha that maybe at least 50% of the time the halacha is not like the Rambam. The fact that in Hilchas Mashiach, usually the Rebbe said that a lot of the things, the Rambam is the only one that discusses it, and there's no chelkim. In the union of Cheskes Mashiach, there's no chelik. So we paskin like the Rambam in that case. It doesn't mean everything the Rambam says about Mashiach we paskin like. We know there are other things about Mashiach that the Rambam says that we definitely don't paskin like. The Rambam says that after Mashiach comes, people are not going to live forever, and the Rebbe says clear the hachroya of Kabbalah and Chassidus is not that way. As far as that aspect of the Rambam was never discussed, we never said the halacha is like that Rambam, and we're not changing. There's no change whatsoever. We never focused on the end of the Rambam. I just want to mention, a lot of people mention that there are other ways of saying pshat in the Rambam. In other words, instead of saying that we don't paskin like the Rambam, we could try to interpret the Rambam in other ways that it wouldn't be a stira. For example, we could say that when the Rambam says that if the Mashiach is killed, the Rambam used the lashon nerag, he's slain, then we know that it's not Mashiach. And that possibly could be because if he's slain, that means he's failed. He's trying to protect Eretz Yisrael, and if he's slain, that means he's lost the war. That means that he's not Mashiach. But if he dies naturally, then perhaps it's not a raya. Now, I'm not going to say that all these pshatim are not possible. There are possible, and there are many other pshatim that you could say. You could talk from today till tomorrow and say a lot of different pshatlach in the Rambam. But there's no question, I mean, any pshatl you could argue on it, you could say either it's true or it's not true. You cannot argue on the fact that the Rebbe paskin not like the Rambam. It's just totally not, it's undeniable. The Rebbe said clearly, and he was mazmir bariches, and he said, the Rebbe, in that sikha, the Rebbe said, in Tashim and Vav, he said that they're going to say it's a vilde zach, and he said it's not a vilde zach. Al pitera, you could still believe, the Rebbe didn't say it's hepech Rambam over there, but it's clear that the Rebbe was assuming that it's okay, al pitera, to assume that. So that's clear and undeniable. So instead of going into other pshatim, which might be true, and I'm not saying they're not, I just wanted to say something which is clear and absolute, and there's no question about it, that the halacha is not like that Rambam. Any Lubavitcher who comes with that Rambam, if somebody doesn't accept the authority of the Rebbe, gets into hate. But for a Lubavitcher to come to say with the Rambam, when everyone knows clearly that the Rebbe spoke about the Sinyan, and he said clearly that that the halacha is not that way, it was just a very simple and clear way of answering that issue. The second thing was, we mentioned many times, and people said, a few people asked the question, that what's going on here? You told us last time that Mashiach is not going to die. You quoted a source that the tefillos were iskabel, and that the Gzeira was batel, which is true. There is that source. The source is a place that the Ramchal mentions it in one of his svarim, and the Gra mentions it. There might be other sources, but there are dozens of sources that after the Gra and after the Ramchal that say that the Gzeira was not nisbatel. The Alter Rebbe himself in a Maimer says clearly that the Gzeira wasn't nisbatel, and that Mashiach ben Yosef has to go through the union of Misa. Why we didn't mention it, it's obvious. I mean, we could see from all the Rebbe's sichas, and from all the previous forum, everyone was trying every way possible to avert the Gzeira, by davening and by going through the union of Tzaddik Geyser of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Makayim. The Gra said halacha, it was bottled Gzeira. Did he have a prophecy that it was bottled Gzeira? No. He was Geyser, but Tzaddik Geyser of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Makayim. He wanted to force the Eibishter to avert the Gzeira. There's the Zohar we see tries in many places to get around the Gzeira and say that it doesn't have to happen. There are many, in the Rebbe's Sichos, we see a lot of times the Rebbe says it doesn't have to happen. In other words, all tzaddikim were trying to get around it. But there's I didn't have a prophecy that we're going to get around it. I mean, why should somebody asked me before, why didn't I prepare anyone for this if I knew the sources? I mean, that would be ridiculous. I should mention the possibility, or even think the possibility. I wouldn't even allow it to enter my mind the possibility that the tefillas weren't iskabel. Why should I even think it or say it? Chas v'sholom, it's al pi halacha, al tiftach pelasat. You're not allowed to say something. Since there was definitely a possibility that it was averted, why should I focus on the other possibility? Why should I even think it? Let that thought go into my mind. Of course I knew about the sources, but I didn't want to discuss them, I didn't want to mention them, and I didn't want to think about them. I had a source that it wasn't isbatel. But of course, just because now that it happened already, to say, why did you say that before, or what's happening here? I mean, the question is, we try to get around it. We try to get around the Holocaust. I mean, the tzaddikim that knew about Chevlei Mashiach were definitely mispal that it shouldn't happen, but it did happen. For some reason, we don't have no idea of why Hashem does these things, why He didn't listen. So many tzaddikim were mispal. How in the world could He not listen? Tzaddik goes about Kadosh Baruch Hu Makayim. How is it possible that He didn't listen? We don't understand. We don't understand the Holocaust, and we don't understand Gimel Tammuz. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Gimel Tammuz did happen, and Gimel Tammuz was mentioned in all the sources, and it was known from Sheish Shmei Bereshis that it was a definite possibility that it was going to happen. So now, the question is now how to relate to it. It's not something new. It's something that was always there and it was planned to be, and for some reason we weren't zeicher that it should be averted. The Gzeira that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided, the Gzeira was Kayim.
We can only say, when you think for 1 second, it's unbelievable that we're standing only one day after Shiva, and we're still somehow capable of talking and discussing something so painful. It only shows how true this is. It only shows our connection to the Rebbe and to his directives to us. It shows an unbelievable hiskashrus of Chassidim to a Rebbe, that they're able to overcome emotions in the worst of times, knowing that this is what the Rebbe expects from them. And it is also evidence to the statement that we keep hearing, Ala Yazev Tzein Marisei, that God forbid the Rebbe for 1 second will not abandon us. This question will be answered by Rabbi Blooming. Again, it's really one question that we all have on our mind. It just expresses itself in all different ways. So many times the essence of the question remains the same, but some of the details are important in conversation. The question says, many people received from us the emunah that the Rebbe is Moshiach, and that he is a human being, a living person, according to the Rambam. Now they will ask, if you say that the Rebbe is Moshiach, where is the living flesh and blood? Rabbi Blooming will answer this question, and he will follow, I guess, with some other questions. Read the question, very important.
The fact that Moshiach is someone who is living, so we see this from the Rambam, Yamid Melech Beis David, it's a person that lives in this world, gets up and accomplishes certain things until he finally succeeds and builds the Beis HaMikdash and takes all Yidden out of Golus. And then he is Moshiach Vadai. Then we know we had the fulfillment of the promise of the Torah that Moshiach will eventually come. Another thing we know about a living Moshiach is the sources that the Rebbe kept on mentioning in the Sichis and Tafshin and Beis, how in every generation there is a tzaddik who is roi to be Moshiach, B'chol Deir V'Deir, Neilad Echad Mizera Yehuda, from Malchus Beis David, and if the Geulah comes in that generation, then he will become the Mashiach. Another source we see in the Arizal also very clearly, the Arizal, based on the Zohar says that when the Geulah will come, Vahu Yoima, Mashiach is going to come out of Gan Eden. This is what it says in Zohar. So the Arizal asks, what do you mean he's going to come out of Gan Eden? Isn't Mashiach a living person in this world? A person, Mashiach is a Basar Adam. Where is he going to come from Gan Eden? So he explains, of course, Mashiach is a tzaddik living in this world. But the neshama of Mashiach, this is in Gan Eden, and when the time comes, when the Kates comes, then the neshama of Mashiach in Gan Eden will come down into this tzaddik in this world. So these are clear sources how Mashiach is someone, a person, a living person in this world who's going to be Mashiach. However, once it comes the Kates, and it comes the time for the Hisgalus of Mashiach, for him to be revealed, so the same Zohar, the same Arizal, go through many stages, what is going to take place at that time. In the same Arizal, it says Befedish, that after the Kates comes and after the Neshama of Mashiach comes into him, he will be hidden. It says Yizgan is Beguful Benefesh, will be hidden, his body will be hidden, his soul will be hidden, and many other things that we cannot claim to say that we know exactly what they mean. But in any case, the stages and the procedure of the Hisgalus HaMashiach is not a contradiction to the fact that a person living in this world is Mashiach, because true, the person living in this world is a Mashiach, and he's going to succeed. But in the procedure of his Galus goes through certain stages, which is possible, and like the Zohar that was publicized, it says clearly in Zohar, that for a short while there'll be this thing of Hepech HaChaim. So it's not a stira, it's not a contradiction to the fact that Moshiach is a living person. Because Moshiach is a living person, and this is just a procedure of his galus until he finally succeeds and takes Eden out of galus. This is also the answer to the question. The question reads over here, does Moshiach ben David have to be alive now? So again, all the sources do not indicate that Moshiach has to be alive every single second. It's not possible that through the procedure there might be a union of Hepech HaChaim for a short while. Another question here, is it possible that the Frierdiker Rebbe is Moshiach ben David, as the Rebbe said that he is the Moshiach? Well, if you're going according to what the Rebbe said that the Nasi Adir of each generation is Moshiach. Obviously, since we have a new generation, since the Frierdiker Rebbe is passing, there's a new generation, Deir Ashvi with a Nasi Adir. So according to the Rebbe's words, the new Nasi is the Nasi Adir and the Mashiach of the generation. And if the Geulah comes in this generation, the Nasi Adir of this generation is going to be the Mashiach, just like it's not going to be a previous Nasi Adir from 10 generations ago. So if we know that the Geulah is going to come in this generation in the Deir Ashvi, the Deir that the Rebbe, the Nasi is our Nasi Adir, so seemingly it sounds clear from the Sichis that the way it's going to be is that the Rebbe is going to be the Mashiach, the Nasi Adir of the present generation. He's going to be the one that's going to be actually Mashiach. The fact that we see that in the Rebbe Sichas clearly that the Frierdiker Rebbe and the actual Mashiach are two people, we see this in the Rosh Tevis of Miyad, that the Rebbe says Miyad is the Rosh Tevis, the Mem is Mashiach, Menachem Shmoy. The Yud is for the two letters of the Yosef Yitzchak of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Dalet from the Rebbe Nishmas Eden. So we see how Mashiach, Menachem is one person, and the Yud is the Frierdiker Rebbe, another person. Another thing we see in Vayigash of Nun Beis, it says also that Mashiach, it says Vayigash, I love Yehuda. So Yehuda came to Yosef. It's explained in Chassidus. This is the connection with Yehuda is Mashiach, David HaMelech from Yehuda. So the Rebbe says that we have the Mashiach, Yehuda, who comes with the power and the help of the Yosef Shebedereinu, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe. So we see how the Frierdiker Rebbe, he gives the power and the help, and with his koyach comes Mashiach, Yehuda, the final Mashiach. Another question over here reads like this. The biggest confusion amongst us now is not whether the Rebbe is Mashiach, because every chassid knows, as the Rebbe clearly told us. The shaila is, what are we supposed to tell the world? Until now, we rest on the Rebbe's broad shoulders, Heroes Haskomis, to be mefarsim it. Not to mention that Yechi, that the Rebbe was shaking his head the whole time. But what about now? Maybe it will be Merachik people. And other indication against such pirsum is that in Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe never told Chassidim to be mefarsim the things he said about the Frierdiker Rebbe as Moshiach. Well, as a question, if we are supposed to tell the world, if we're supposed to be mefarsim to the world, the future will be that the Rebbe is going to get up and be Mashiach, take us out of Golus, there is no clear indication if we are supposed to be doing this, if we're supposed to telling the world. There's present and there's future. We knew that the Rebbe was the Mashiach of the generation. When the Rebbe was living as the Nasi Adir, the Mashiach of the generation, and present, he's the Mashiach. If the Geulah comes any minute, any second the Geulah comes, he's going to be the Mashiach, takes us out of Golus. Currently, he was the Mashiach of the generation. He even had the Psak Din of Cheskas Shehu Mashiach. Al Pi Halacha, we had to say the Rebbe is Melech HaMashiach. And the Rebbe was shaking his head and making with all his koyach and barabim and pirsum in public in front of the whole world, how yes, he's nodding to the fact that he's Melech HaMashiach. The future that we know from the Rebbe's Sichis, that the Deir Ashvi, this is the generation that's going to have the Geulah. And since we know clearly there's no new Nasi Adir, it's not going to be a new Nasi Adir, because then it will be the next Deir. The Nasi Adir from the Rebbe's words is clear. The Nasi Adir makes each generation. If we're going to say, if we might think there's going to be a new Nasi Adir now, and he's going to be the Mashiach, this doesn't work with the Rebbe's words that the 7th generation, the 9th generation, 3rd generation, whatever you want to call it, will be the generation of the Geulah. So if we simply follow the Rebbe's words, it's clear the Rebbe is going to be the one that's going to take us out of Golus. Just like we see in the Sichos of Tafshin Yud, that until Tafshin Yud Aleph, until Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe did not openly accept the Nesiyus. So the whole time when the Rebbe was saying we should have the Geulah, he wasn't just saying we should be redeemed from Golus, makes no difference who Mashiach is. He kept on saying the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, should come back into his body and take us out of Golus. So seemingly this would be the Seder, since the Nasi Adir is the Mashiach. So in the first year, until the Rebbe accepted the Nesiyus, the Frierdiker Rebbe was the Nasi Adir, so then he was the Mashiach continuously. Now that we have the Rebbe took over the leadership and became the Nasi Adir, so he's the Mashiach of the generation. As to go and say if we should be mefarsim this, there's no clear indications. No one could say that we have a clear hira that it's an Indian to be mefarsim this. You can tell people what you feel. You can tell people your certainty about the future. To go be mefarsim I don't think there's any clear indications if we can say that we dafka should go and be mefarsim this. This seemingly answers the next question over here. How do we know for sure that the Rebbe is Moshiach? Maybe there's someone else, or now Hashem has a big choice in the world of neshamas. Well, that's the answer, because the Rebbe said that the Nasi Adir is Moshiach, and this generation is the generation that will get the Geulah. And he said clearly that we mentioned before in Tafshin Yud Aleph how the Friedrich Rebbe is Nasi Adir until Bias HaMashiach. And then this